I am Bill Brown, the Director of Innovative Evangelism, and it is a joy to welcome you to our first Training Tuesday of December and our third to last for 2024. And it is an excellent topic for tonight, particularly as we find ourselves in the Advent season, which tends to be a little busy in the life of the local church, and moving into the Christmas season, which tends to get even busier in the life of the local church. And here we have the opportunity to learn a little bit about living well and living a holistic and balanced life. So I'm excited to be joined by our presenters tonight, who will be introducing themselves momentarily. Just a few technical instructions for this evening. First is our chat is open. Make sure when you're using the chat that you click on the button that says everyone. And while we're getting started, just please drop your name in the chat, your local church, and which annual conference you're with. And that just gives everybody an idea that there are actually other people in the room with them tonight, even though you can't see it. So please drop that in the chat. And there'll be an opportunity during the presentation tonight to interact and to reflect using the chat. However, if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature. And I say that because if everybody starts putting their questions in the chat, we'll lose questions quickly, and we want to be able to answer as many questions as we possibly can tonight. So we're going to get started with a word of prayer, and I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful presenters, and they will get us through this evening of education and interest. So would you pray with me, please? Holy and gracious God, as we move into this Advent season and as we prepare for Christmas, as we prepare to celebrate that first Advent of your Son Jesus, as we prepare to get ready for his second Advent, let us not get lost in the busyness of the season, but help us to slow down and to breathe, to be able to sit in silence and to wait as we prepare to truly celebrate the gift of you becoming one of us. I give you thanks for our presenters tonight and for their insight and their wisdom as they prepare to lead us, and how we can better reflect our love for you and our love for others as we approach a life well lived. So send forth your Spirit wherever we may be, O God, knowing that we are gathered in this virtual space as one body. We pray this all in the name of Jesus. Amen. Wonderful. I'm not sure who's going first, so Living Well team, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. I'm Jack Shitama. I am a clergy member of the Peninsula Delaware Conference, and I am the director of the Center for Vital Leadership, which serves our entire Episcopal area. And Living Well is a part of the Center for Vital Leadership and has served over 100 clergy from our annual conferences over the past 3 years. And in that, we've learned about how to take care of self. Whether we're clergy or lay, if we can't take care of self, we can't take care of others. And so we have some great members of our team who are going to share with you what we've learned over the past 3 years. Amanda?
Sorry, too many buttons. Good evening, everybody. My name is Amanda McMurtrey, and I serve at May United Methodist Church in Edgewater, Maryland, just south of Annapolis. And I have the joy of having been part of the Living Well team and program for 5 years now. And one of the things that I have really gained from Living Well, not only going through it, but also guiding others, is a growing awareness. I think when people talk to me about being healthy, I almost always reduced it to physical health. Not that that isn't important, but I really didn't pay attention to some of the other areas of health that I feel like the Living Compass really brings into relationship. And what I've begun to realize is as I grow in one area, I almost always blossom in another as well. And so I have found that interaction and that balance to be a really great thing that I have discovered through Living Well. Twanda?
I am Twanda King, and I'm in the Baltimore-Washington conference, and I serve Union United Methodist Church in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. And I have been part of the Living Well team probably over 4 or 5 years with Amanda. I think we were both there with inception. And so Living Well has been very important with me with living a balanced life. I am one of the clergy in the Baltimore-Washington conference that experienced burnout and had to find a sense of balance in ministry and home life and other areas of my life. So taking this holistic approach for me when it comes to ministry and family and home is very important. So living well is very important to me. So I'm going to turn it over to Martha.
Hi, I'm Martha Meredith. I'm a retired elder in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, living and worshiping in the Annapolis district now. And I was part of the first group who was like the first group of clergy who went through the program. And really at that time, found a focus on heart that meant a lot to me in that season of my life. I've also been able to work as a part of the cohort leadership of that's the groups who meet between the retreats. And that has really fed my need for community, for sharing, and for just accountability. So I'm really grateful for the people who were there in the beginning, and I'm grateful to be a part of that team now.
So I want to just thank everybody who is attending tonight. And so we're going to talk about living well, a holistic approach to a balanced life. We chose those words living well with great intention. We kicked around when we were trying to figure out what to call this area of our work. And, it was being healthy, it was being this, it was being that. And we really landed on living well when we discovered a resource called the Living Compass, which we're going to introduce you to tonight. And you can see a little image of the Living Compass in the 4 quadrants. And the QR code that is on this slide will take you to livingcompass.org, which is their website. And they have an abundance of resources, some of which we will introduce you to tonight. But when we found that, and the compass really gave us this, all of these areas. And we thought what we really wanted for people was not to meet a threshold of evaluation around how they were doing in any particular place, but to actually be embracing what does it mean for each individual person to be living well, heart, mind, soul, and strength. And one of the things that, sorry, I'm trying to flip slides and talk at the same time, and it won't let me flip the slide. So, there we go. So as we go through the focus this evening, we just wanted to give you a heads up. If you were hoping we would give you a list of practices, these are all the things you need to do, and then you will be living well. That is not the focus of living well. Living well is really about self-exploration, self-discovery, and self-reflection. And what we have been trying to do is change the lens through which we come at living well. And so part of that has been a really big part of my journey in particular. So as you think about, out of Paul's letters, right, is where I drew some of this language, right? There is the world and there's the spirit, right? The way of the world and the way of the spirit. When I started to get into this work, I realized that one of the great barriers for me was the way that the world tries to motivate us into whatever the world's image is of being healthy, whether that be something physically or spiritually or emotionally. And I thought that there were 3 primary ways that the world will often try to motivate us: through fear, through shame, and through guilt. So for example, I was doing some reflecting, and just to share a little bit about you with my history, one of my great challenges has been my weight. And I have been overweight since I was 6 years old. So sort of a lifetime of going to doctors and hearing conversations about that. And so many of them came at from an angle of fear or were designed to sort of make me feel lesser. So like I can remember being in school and being told that the reason to be healthy was that we would die younger if we were unhealthy. So this sense of I live well because I want to live as many years as possible, instead of talking about the quality of those years instead of just the quantity of them. I have several conversations where I was told by doctors that I was slowly killing myself. that I lacked and needed to learn self-control, as if those were the only things that were contributing to my health issues. And so one of the things I discovered is that it was rare I would interact with someone that would see the whole person. And, so as you're putting in, if you want to add something to the chat in this moment, I just want to offer, if you've ever had somebody make a comment around some element of health or living well, that you feel like has used fear or shame or guilt. And I see this a lot in our church communities as well, that sometimes we work from a place of fear. Sometimes we use shame or guilting as a motivator. And I believe them to be opposite of living well. And so I did what every clergy person does. I went to scripture and I said, all right, well, what does scripture tell us? So first, throw those words away. That's I don't like those words. So is this scriptural? And I'm going to tell you that no, it really isn't. Some variation of the words, be not afraid, do not be afraid, fear not, appear at least 97 times in scripture. And that includes both the Old and the New Testament. That is a consistent message. In the season of Advent, it could not be more relevant. As if you will notice in each of the stories, as angels appear to Zephaniah and Elizabeth, as they appear to Mary, and then as they appear, a messenger appears to Joseph in a dream, all of them begin their message with do not be afraid, that we are not meant to be a people of fear. If you are someone that's like, well, I know it does say fear the Lord an awful lot in scripture, you're absolutely right. It most certainly does. Particularly, we said it a lot in the book of Psalms. But I just wanted to remind everybody that that word for fear is not the same word in Hebrew, that it's not that we need to be scared of God. It is based in, it's a fear that means really more of a respectful appreciation for someone who is more powerful than us. So fearing the Lord is about remembering and appreciating that God is so much more powerful. And so we have respect for who God is compared to who we are as the creations of God. So as I did that research, and I thought, well, if we're not meant to be people of fear, then who are we meant to be? And so I thought, well, what does Jesus say? And I've always loved that there was a person who thought to ask Jesus, listening to all those sermons and all the information that Jesus, what is the most important thing, Jesus? Help me. Give me one phrase, one sentence to live through. And as so many of us remember, that Jesus responded with, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your mind. Right. And so, and then I know the next most important commandment is to love each other as ourselves. And we spend a lot of time focusing on that and talking about that. And I don't want to diminish it, but I think we actually can skip through this love relationship between us and the Lord. Is how I'm living a reflection of the love of God. And so as I started to really dig deeper into this, and that compass imagery, resonated so strongly with me about, what's the direction that I'm headed in, changing the center of my compass from fear. When I center my world and my living around fear or shame or guilt, when I think about where am I headed then? And that created just a circling movement for me. And instead, I started to say to myself, what would it look like if this journey for me was a reflection of my love for God and only that? And that was really my only goal. I wanted my life to be a reflection of the love that God and I share between us. What if God was my true north? And there was a pivotal moment for me when I came to Mayo. I moved. And so I had a new primary care physician, and I was 39 years old. And I was just waiting because I knew she was going to bring up my weight. At the time, I weighed over 325 pounds. And I will never, ever forget what she said to me when I said, and I know I'm overweight and it's been a lifelong problem. And of all the things I've ever heard from the doctor, she's the only one who has ever said to me, how can I support you as you journey towards your health goals? And that one question changed everything for me, that she could be a person of support, that I started to see her as a resource instead of doctors as something I had to get through and survive because of how they often made me feel that I wasn't good enough or well enough. And to me, it was that first step into understanding this love relationship between God and I. And so we want to invite you, as you explore the living compass, perhaps to consider the lens or the center of your compass. What is your true north? And how do you often frame the conversation for yourself or with others about what it means to be living well?
Amanda, I do so appreciate what you shared about fear and shame and guilt. So often we let those guide us, and it's just a dead end street. It's a compass to guide us nowhere, right? And so what we want to offer you tonight is a look at this living compass, and so that you can realize that you can make a conscious choice about a compass that will help guide you toward more healthy and life-giving decisions. So the goal of Living Compass, as it says here, is to provide individuals with a dynamic tool that will assist them in their search for balance and wellness. So the Living Compass program creates this opportunity for you to check your bearings and figure out where you are right now and maybe where you're headed as well. I took the Living Compass assessment, which is available to anybody online. I took it 3 or 4 years ago whenever I went through the process. And then I took it this past week. And I'll tell you that my compass looks different each time. And if I took it next week, it might look different again. The Living Compass assessment is just a snapshot of a point in time of where you are on these key areas of your life: heart, soul, strength, and mind. But what it helps you to do when you do this for yourself is to slow down, right? To look at your core values, your beliefs, the way you're living at this particular moment in time, so that you can then redirect your life toward a more balanced and centered life. It's all interconnected. Well-being comes from well-doing, and well-doing comes from well-praying, and well-praying comes from well-thinking. So what is whole person wellness? Well, the word wholeness comes from the same root as holy and holiness. And you probably know that to be holy means to be set apart for God's purposes. And that's a common call for everybody who says they follow Christ. Whether you're clergy or lay, we're all called to be holy, to be set apart for God's purposes. And so to do that, to be equipped for that, right, to be equipped for God's purposes, we want this wholeness of our heart and our soul and our strength and our mind. And we experience this wholeness when we're in balance, right? When we're working together, and when those parts are working together as we believe God intends them to work for our good. Now, I want you to remember that picture of the compass in the beginning. I should have pointed it out where there were different, right there. Okay, just take a look at that. And you can see that somebody's taken this assessment and they've scored differently in rest and play than they have in vocation and relationships and resilience and care for the body. All of those things there are different heights. And this is not to say, oh, I'm so good at rest and play, and oh, I really stink at vocation, but more to think about this idea of balance, which I'm going to come back to a little bit more later, and just kind of look at the way that is right now, and imagine a life where that's going on. This Christian way of wholeness and well-being is grounded in our relationship with God, right? It's in our with our neighbors and even with ourselves. It's important. All of that is working together in these four areas. Whole person wellness is intentional. It is we make choices about how we're going to live our lives. We don't have to live at the whims of whatever's going on. We can make some choices, and it's also an inside out process. The things that are going on inside us and around us and so forth changes us from the inside out when we live in this balanced way. The hope and the goal of living well, right, is so that we can live into that great commandment that Amanda's already talked about, the one that came from the book of law in Deuteronomy, and also from the mouth of Jesus, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. So let's look at those four quadrants just briefly, you can see there are the wellness quadrants that we've spoken of many times already: heart, soul, mind, and strength. And each quadrant is broken down into 2 separate areas of focus that are related. And Reverend King is going to go into more depth on those now. So over to you, Twanda.
Okay, thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Martha. So I'm going to go a little more into that wellness compass that you all see up on the screen. You see this quadrant, this heart, soul, strength, and mind. So I'm going to go a little into it. So you see this wellness compass, which includes these 4 quadrants, but there's also 8 areas of wellness, and it involves 8 interrelated areas of wellness. So under the heart, you have relationships and you have handling your emotions. And then under the other ones, you have different areas of wellness, but I'm just going to hit heart right now. So I'm going to briefly go into each quadrant. So under heart, you see relationships and you see handling our emotions. So I want us to just kind of check our bearings where we are right now. I know when I dealt with clergy burnout, what was happening, what I realized in my life, what was happening is that I was probably like real heavy in one quadrant, but not in the others. And I remember when I first went to a therapist, and the therapist said this to me. She said, "Twanda, you are in the business of self-sacrifice, right?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Right now, you don't have a self to sacrifice. You need to find self." And so the other part of that text that Amanda shared and that Meredith shared, that Martha shared, the other part of that text in the scripture also says, "And love your neighbor as yourself." That self part, loving ourselves, is when we love ourselves, is when we can love our neighbor. So under the heart part, let's just take an evaluation just briefly tonight where we are, right? You all will get opportunity and hopefully you will go and take that assessment. So under heart, you have relationships and you have emotions. So if we were just to kind of take a checkup tonight, just to see where we are when it comes to relationships, and I'm going to take a quote. I'm going to say a quote. A wise preacher once said, "Don't ask me if I'm a good Christian. Ask my family, friends, and colleagues, because my relationships with them are the best measure of how fully I am living my Christian life." So where are you when it comes to relationships? How transparent and authentic are you in your relationships? Are you comfortable being vulnerable with those to whom you are close with? Do you turn to others for help and support when you need it? Or are you more of a lone ranger, just a person that just stay to themselves, right? Is there at least one person in your life with whom you can be fully yourself? So let's move to handling emotions. So handling our emotions is the ability to process, express, and receive emotions in a healthy way. And so let's take a checkup when it comes to our emotions. Are you comfortable feeling and expressing the full range of emotions? Sadness, fear, anger, joy. A lot of times when people ask us how we're feeling, a lot of times we can't really express it and give a feeling word to it. Sometimes we just would go, "Oh, I'm okay," or "I had an okay day." We don't we don't attach an emotion to it. So do your emotions get the best of you, causing you to say or do things you later regret? You just speak real quick in the moment. Are you ever concerned that you might be suffering from depression or anxiety? This is an emotional checkup. Would you be comfortable seeking help if you were troubled by your emotions? Because sometimes we're good at seeking help when we're troubled, when it comes to, like a bellyache or a headache, or we're aching in our body. But, our emotions also ache. We ache in our emotions. So are you comfortable listening and being present with someone who is hurting, upset, or very emotional? In the words of the Serenity Prayer, how well are you able to say, or accept the things you cannot change, have the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference? And so let's move to the soul quadrant. Thank you. The soul quadrant. So under the soul quadrant, we have spirituality and we have rest and play. Spirituality, rest, and play. So under spirituality is the ability to connect with a higher purpose in life and have a clear set of beliefs, morals, and values that guide our actions. So let's look under soul. Like let's look under this. So as you assess your satisfaction with these dimensions of life, think about the following components of spiritual life. Think about like regular spiritual practices. Do you have regular spiritual practices? So this would include like your daily prayer life, devotions, meditation, journaling, walking in nature, Bible study, reading. Like what kind of spiritual practices do you have? It's easy for us to have a very busy day and this become the last thing on our life. I mean, the last thing on our calendar. And sometimes we say, oh, I'm gonna get to it at night. And we never get to it because we're just so tired and we're just so exhausted. And so our spiritual life go on the back burner. How often do you do these things? Are you participating in your faith community? Are you active in your faith community? Do you attend church regularly? Do you seek opportunities to enrich your spiritual life? Sometimes we got to seek opportunities to enrich our spiritual life. Are you a consumer in your faith community, or do you regularly give back and help serve others? Are you looking to get more than you give? Do you practice forgiveness? Or do you need to forgive or seek forgiveness from family, your family of origin, a current family member, a spouse, a partner, a child, a friend? Do you struggle with forgiving people in any way? We're evaluating our spiritual life. So under soul, there's also rest and play. Now, this was the area that I was kind of having a hard time in, and that's the rest and play. I probably was a little bit heavy on the spiritual part, but and probably because I'm a pastor, so I'm in that area all the time. So it was kind of easy in that part, but that rest and play part, taking time to rest and play, that rest and play part is the ability to balance work and play to renew ourselves. Laughter is good. We need to renew ourselves. And rest and play helps us to renew. You can discover more about a person. Listen to this. This is a quote. You can discover more about a person in an hour of play than a year of conversation. Let me say that again. You can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. You ever been in somebody's presence? It just doesn't seem like they smile. It doesn't seem like they lighten up. Sometimes you look at them, you say, you need to lighten up a little. Right? You need to laugh a little. You need to lighten up a little. You ever been in somebody's presence like that? Right? Here are some questions to help you assess your satisfaction with the rest and the play. How often do you play? Do you have play in your life? How often do you? What are the attitudes about play in your family of origin? And in the family of origin part, I'm going to say this. When you go through each quadrant, ask yourself the question about family of origin in that quadrant. When you go through each quadrant, ask yourself about family of origin, because family of origin has a big impact on your today. So how do you play? How do you play? Do you use part of your resting time to connect with God? Do you take time to recreate every week or weekend? And I'm going to say this to the pastors that's on here. What about your Sabbath day? Do you take a Sabbath? And do you take a day off? Do you take that? Do you work on your Sabbath? Do you find yourself getting up and working on your Sabbath and saying to yourself, I really don't have time? And I'm going to plug in living well, because if you don't have time, I'm going to say you really need to be in the next living well. If you're saying to yourself, I really don't have time to take off, you really need to take the time to join Living Well. So, do you take the time to recreate every week or weekend? You know, for even God rested for 6 days, and God had a Sabbath. Do you take all of your allotted vacation time? Are you taking your vacation? Or are you saying, I don't have time for vacation? And sometimes people say, well, you know what, I really can't afford to take a vacation. You probably can't afford to go away. But what you can afford to do is take a vacation. And now they call it staycations, right? So you probably can't afford to go away, but what you can afford to do is take a vacation. Do you have hobbies that you enjoy? I remember a colleague saying this to me. What is it that you like to do? Like, what do you like to do? And I mean, he kept drilling me with that question and drilling me with that question. And he said the reason why he kept doing that is because everything that I kept on saying that I like to do was connected to the church. And so he said, don't you have grandkids? Wouldn't your grandkids like to go to Disney? He was pushing me to come out of one area of this quadrant and go into another, to have that balanced life. Do you have hobbies? Do you get enough sleep on a regular basis? Rest is very important. Sleep is very important. Okay, let's get into this strength quadrant. I think that's the next one, the strength quadrant. So the strength quadrant, we have care for the body, and we have resilience. So care for the body is the ability to build healthy habits and practices regarding our physical well-being. It's the ability to build healthy habits and practices regarding our physical well-being. So are you mindful about your nutrition and eating patterns? A balanced diet is important. Are you concerned that you too often eat for emotional reasons as a way to comfort yourself? And what role does alcohol or other drugs play in your life? Are you content with that role? Are you content with the role that it's playing in your life? Like, you might be over consuming, and every time you drink, you are guilty because you have went overboard. Are you consistent about going to the doctor and dentist, regular checkups? And are you comfortable with your sexuality and your sexual needs? This is our care for our body. We have to care for this temple that God has given us. Our body is a temple, and we have to care for our temple. So I'm going to go to resilience. The Bible says, come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. So on the resilience part is stress. The stress. And resilience is the ability to deal positively with the adversities of life. Let me kind of put a plug in this. When most of you know that my husband passed away in June. And I took a break for a whole year while he was sick from I'm gonna say my conference ministries, the other ministries that I was in the conference, besides what I was doing at the church. And I'm saying that to say I'm going somewhere with this. So when I came back to living well, one thing that I found out during this season is, because I'm learning to have that balance of heart, soul, strength, and mind. And I had the balance before I actually went into this season of my life. It's helping me. The resources that I had these resources that I can draw from, that's helping me with the stress of this season of my life. Now, and that's important. This is resilience, because we have to have resources. God has given us resources. And when we have these resources during those stressful moments, because life happens, and as the young people would say, life be lifing. And when life happens, God has given us resources. But a lot of times we haven't built up on those resources. So to draw from, my therapist was on speed dial. She was on speed dial every week. She was calling me, or I was calling her in the midst of my husband's transition. My therapist was calling me. So resilience, stress resilience, has to do with how well we deal with two separate aspects of our lives. And that is how we emotionally and spiritually negotiate significant changes and transitions. Let me say that again. How we emotionally and spiritually negotiate significant changes and transitions, planned and unplanned. Because planned transitions can be stressful. Even though they are planned, they still can be stressful. So how do we negotiate changes and transitions, planned and unplanned, and how well we manage stress in general? That's the resilience part. And because, and I'm gonna go to mind, and because, as I was saying, that I had these resources, I had something to pull from. Immediately, I started training for a half marathon because I had a resource. It was like, I need to do something. Stress is heavy on the body. How can I get this stress out of my body? But I only knew that because I'm part of Living Well, right? And I have the resources. Okay, so let's go into mine. Mine is vocation and organization. So organization is the ability to keep track of and make good use of possessions, money, and time. The resources that God has given us. God has given us these resources. So how do we make best use of the resources that God has given us? And I'm going to read Luke 14. Luke 14, 28 through 30 says, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish it, all who will see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish it.'" He didn't look at the resources. So being disorganized can be both a symptom and a cause of stress in our lives, whether it be disorganization of time, environment, finances, or planning. Everything becomes harder and requires more time when we're not organized. And now I'm going to go into vocation, and then I'm going to turn it back over to one of my colleagues. So vacation is the ability to align our life purposes with the gifts and talents that God has given us. The ability to align our life purpose with the gifts and talents that God has given us. So this includes work, volunteer, service, or any educational enrichment pursuits. So vocation has to do with knowing both our gifts and our purpose in life. Are we operating in those areas in our lives? So I just gave you an overview of the 4 quadrants of heart, soul, strength, and mind. And I think Martha is going to come back next because all of it is interrelated.
Boy, that's the truth. Twanda, I just want to thank you for that great witness to how living a balanced life can get you through what all seems unimaginable, and just the importance of the living well way of life. So I love pie charts. I love things that break things down into 4 groups with 2 subquadrants. It just makes me happy. It makes my heart sing. I love all those questions that come underneath them all. But the truth is, they're not separate. We don't have like a mind quadrant and a heart quadrant. We're all interconnected, just like that mobile that you see before you. If you touch one area of that mobile with your finger and the other parts move gently, an ill wind comes through and blows one part and the rest of it rattles like crazy. It's all interconnected. And so what we're trying to do is look at those 4 parts of our life, of our good life that we want to live, and to be intentional about the way that we are equipping ourselves, that the way the subsections are guiding us to just make different decisions about how we want to live our lives. Because our goal is, let's take a look at that next slide. Our goal in living well is living a balanced life, right? The purpose of taking the time to go through that living compass assessment, right, is to assist us in our search for balance and wellness, the undivided life, right, where heart and soul and strength and mind are integrated and working together in our being and in our doing. And so that's the goal of it all. So I hope that you'll take the invitation that has been offered, and more that will be coming, and look for that living compass to help you, live the most whole and balanced and integrated life that's possible for you. So I think that Twanda is going to lead us into some reflection now.
Thank you, Martha. So I have some reflection questions, and I really want you to really think about this wholeheartedly. And Bill, I think he wrote in the chat that this will be available. This will actually be available in, I guess, a couple weeks or next week. I'm not sure, but you can take a picture of the screen. So think about these questions. And which area of the living compass are you doing well? And what area are you doing well? And what area or areas? And if you are comfortable, you can put an answer in the chat. If you're comfortable, you can put the answer in the chat. If you're not comfortable, I want to challenge you to write it down. Sometimes writing stuff down, taking out your mind and writing it down, sometimes that helps. So in which area or areas of the living well compass you're doing well? You might be well in, somebody might say all 4 areas or 2 areas or just 1 area. And which area or areas of the living compass are you most challenged? You say, you know what, I realize that I'm really not doing too good in this area. And what's one thing you can do to find more wholeness and or balance? One thing you could do to find more wholeness and or balance. Feel free to write in the chat. Somebody say resilience and care for the body. They're doing well. Thank you for sharing that. And if you don't feel comfortable, as I was saying, just write it on a piece of paper. I feel good in the heart and the soul, and feel mind and strength need more balance. That's good. I like that. That's self-evaluation. Soul and strength doing well, most challenging heart. Thank you. Thank you for writing that. Need more play. Somebody said they need more play. Need more play. Yeah. I think a lot of us can lighten up, right? Need more play. Thank you all for thank you for sharing that, for just sharing. And I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Thank you both so much. I really appreciate the questions. And I have to say that the exploration of the interconnectedness and the balance was really helpful for me. That was an area I had separated things so much that I didn't realize that my lack of spending time with friends was one of the reasons that I was struggling to exercise, right? Like I didn't see some of that. And one of the reasons I value those questions is that we are doing things well. We're not starting from ground zero. We are doing things well, and then we are being challenged. And one of the things I've come to learn, and I feel like Twanda really referenced this well when she was speaking, is in seasons of life that shifts. All of this, for a while there, I was really doing well in one area and I was being challenged in another. And in the last year, I have felt them switch. And so now I'm exploring some different things. But so far, we have really been coming at the Living Compass and at living well from this sense of self, which is, I could not agree more with Twanda. I believe so strongly that you cannot fulfill the commandment of loving someone else if you do not discover how to love yourself. I mean, it's contingent upon that we really will never fully love someone else if we don't learn to love ourselves as well. That we will always hold some part of love back because of how we are struggling to judge ourselves and to assess ourselves. And so, but we all know that we don't live in vacuums. We live in relationship, and a big part of our faith journey and of our being created beings of God is we were created to exist in community. And communities exist in a lot of ways. We have faith communities. You might have family community. They may overlap. They may not. This is very individual. And that's one of the reasons I just want to remind everybody that we come at this from an individual standpoint is it should not, and I can't say this enough, I believe so strongly, it should not look the same for every person. Each of us was created to be a beautiful and unique child of God. And so it needs to be different. So I was laughing with Twanda before our presentation because she's getting ready to do this half marathon. Beloved, I cannot begin to describe something that would be less fulfilling for me than running. Like it feeds no part of my soul. It hurts every part of my body. And the whole time I'm trying to do it, all I can think is, I think I'm going to die. Right. So that's not my thing. Now, there are other things that I love to. I get to go to the theater this week. That's going to light me up. Right. So it needs to be different for all of us. But I also, when I first started doing this work, it really was trying to handle some things in my own life. I have a similar background to Twanda, and then I found myself in a very broken place. I was within moments of walking away from ministry altogether. And I don't know that would have been just as a clergy person. I think I might have walked away in more damaging ways to my journey than that. And so I was really doing a lot of self-work, and I needed that. But as I was doing some of that work, I started looking differently at how we exist in community. And I started to see some of the challenges in my own journey showing up in how we gather, particularly in faith community, though I would argue it is likely present in other forms of community as well. And so I want to share with you this image. So I love information and knowledge. I don't always retain it. I don't always use it wisely, but I love it. I think one of the labels for that is to be a nerd. And I found myself as I moved to Colorado for a period of life, discovering an aspen tree, which is not something you find in the state of Maryland, which is where I spent most of my life growing up. And so this is a picture for you of an aspen tree grove in case you've never had a chance to see one. And the reason it's called an aspen tree grove is because the picture before you is a single tree. It has multiple sprouts. But it is not actually 50 different trees. It is a single tree. The root system is all from one organism that expresses itself in different sprouts. And I found that to be such a beautiful image for faith community, and that we are one organism that expresses itself in these different sprouts. And you can see some of them are taller than others. So even though it's a single tree, not every aspect of it is in the same place of growth. Some of them have already dropped their leaves in this image, and some of them still have their leaves. You can feel the nerd coming out, I know, right? But some of them, you can see where some of the deadwood has fallen. That some of them have had to let deadwood fall away, right? But And there are aspen groves that they have found that they estimate being up to 150 miles. So just these enormous groves of trees. But what I found the most intriguing was how the tree responds when one of the sprouts is struggling. And for me, it's something that started to become a strong value and priority for me of living well that we have brought into, I have tried to bring into my family, I have brought into my friend relationships, and I have brought strongly into my faith community. When one of the sprouts is struggling in any way, it doesn't have access to something, maybe there's a drought, maybe the nutrients in the soil are lacking, whatever that might be, if a bug is attacking it, instead of cutting it off so that the rest of the organism can survive, the rest of the grove will push nutrients and life-sustaining pieces towards the struggling sprout. And I just found that to be such a beautiful thing, because that has not often been how I experienced how we react to members of our community that are unwell, that we would push what is needed towards them so that they might have a chance to get through this challenging moment and then continue to grow. And so some of this work for me landed in Psalm 92 that you can read there, but it's this idea for me of they will bear fruit even when old and gray, they will remain lush and fresh in order to proclaim the Lord is righteous. He's my rock. There's nothing unrighteous in him. That there is no season of life where our value actually declines. We are never more or less valuable. That we are always producing fruit, that we are always lush, and that we are always seeking to proclaim the Lord. And that when we are struggling to do some of those things, that our communities might respond by pushing nutrients to us. Now, you might be thinking, well, Amanda, that makes sense because it's all one tree, so it's just trying to save a part of itself. Aha. Well, as you know, I said I was nerdy, and I found a book called The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wolleben. And as I was reading through that, here's something else I discovered. Trees will do this across species. So particularly trees that are in a forest situation where they have formed a canopy. If one tree is struggling, other trees of different species will push nutrients in the soil and water and other resources to that tree, because the damage to one part of the canopy is devastating to all. And then there's this recognition that what happens to one will impact the others, that the interconnectedness is not something that just exists in us as individuals, but actually is a part of how God created us to be as disciples together in the body of Christ. And we hear this in imagery very often in the letters of Paul, right, where we talk about the different parts of the body and how they all function together. And so I started to bring this into my faith community and into deeper conversation. And I noticed a few things. So I noticed that sometimes when a person would miss church, the response they would get would not be a celebration that they had chosen to take vacation or to prioritize their family on that day, but instead would be a response of disappointment, perhaps even shame of them not always being present at everything. And we started to talk about the realization no one can be present at everything. If we did that, we wouldn't need one another. And so we started talking about what wholeness and balance look like within our faith communities, our congregations, within our ministries. And we started talking about the ways that we might accidentally encourage behaviors that lead to frustration, burnout, and resentment. That's not our goal, but we tend to do this. I have come to use a term in my congregation that we use a term called positive shaming. So let me run this little scenario by you and see if it rings familiar. And this is not specific to church. I imagine many of you would have experiences at your workplaces, outside of church, and in many other places. Have you ever been asked to do something and you say to that person, I will consider it? And you do. You take prayerful time to consider. So you don't just say no out of turn or yes. You just actually take time to consider it. And you find that you need to say no. And when you say no to that person, they begin to tell you all the things about you that are wonderful and needed. And that is why you should actually say yes. Positive shaming. But you're so good at this. We need you, right? And instead of saying, I'm so glad that you know the boundaries you need to set. So in my congregation, we have started this in some small ways. Before any meeting that we have in church, we check in with one another. How is it with your soul this day? How was your day? Because we bring our whole selves to the table, and our whole selves aren't always our best selves. And to be able to say that, honestly, I am not bringing my best self to this meeting tonight, but I am here. Or to say, I'm not coming to the meeting because I just need to do something different. Good, glad you're caring for yourself. It's how we started responding. So when we started talking about the things that we could improve around this, and I have done retreats at individual churches that have had me come. I've done that 2 different churches where I did a day of work around this and really talking about how this shows up and how we treat one another, and really trying to make sure that we speak to these aspects of loving God. So hearing the word no, we have reduced the amount of times that a person can say, I'm sorry, in a single Sunday morning, because we have some people that were always apologizing when they were doing nothing wrong and nothing harmful. So they weren't actually asking for forgiveness. They were just constantly beating themselves up. So they've been restricted. They're no longer allowed to say, I'm sorry, as many times on a single Sunday. The way we respond to the word no is that no is a complete sentence. You can share with me your reasons if that would be something that would be meaningful for you, but I'm happy to receive just a no. And we always honor a no. And it has really changed how I see people interacting. I'm watching people speak more openly and more vulnerably about how they're struggling or about what they're using to help themselves. I find that the conversations around mental health, which is a lot of which is dealing with our emotions, has become an open conversation. And it's just been a really beautiful thing to see start to be present. And I genuinely believe it's because I started sharing some of what I had found for myself in living well and changing how we live well in community. And that has included, we have done a Bible study together around this work. We have done a worship series around this work. And we have a small living well group in my congregation that is for persons to just come together. Because one of the other things that we found, this work has been strongly based with our clergy brothers and sisters and siblings. But we're hearing more and more of a need of it for our laity as well. But universally, after every cycle of living well, there are multiple people that say that the best thing they found was the discovery that they were not alone. It was not that they were bad at doing this. It is not that they couldn't overcome things. It was this connection with one another to hear other people struggling and to hear other people and how they're seeking to balance themselves and to prioritize things in their lives and how hard that is. Twanda was talking earlier about the need for Sabbath for clergy people, which I couldn't agree with more. But as I look at some of my lay people, I think they need Sabbath way more than they're giving themselves credit for, right? Particularly, I look at some of my parents, right? They work a full-time job all week. They come home and they parent and they provide for their families in the evenings. And then the weekend is this like nightmare schedule of moving from one thing to the next. The number of times that I've interacted with somebody on a Sunday morning, not just parents, but people that, they're going to go from church to this, to this, to this, to this. And so as we've talked about the priority of rest and play, an intention that sometimes you have to take a break from church to do those things, particularly for those that are in roles of leadership. So it's just been very transformative work. So I wanted to offer you some of these questions and to think about just one small thing that you might bring into your own faith community or into your family that might just change how you're responding when someone tries to prioritize living well. Because I think that is something that our faith communities and our families should value and should support. So we wanted to just offer a couple of places that you could go for resources. I know that the website was dropped earlier into the chat feature, but some things we want you to know that Living Compass provides, all of which is free. They are a ministry in and of themselves. They also utilize the same scripture reading of love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind as the center of their ministry. And it is their ministry to provide resources for all persons to be living well and to be achieving some of these things in their lives and really finding this for themselves. They started as doing that only within a faith world, and now they have expanded it so that they have versions of things that can be used in job settings, because they found persons in faith communities saying, this is so good, I want to be able to share it I want to be able to do some of this with my coworkers, but I can't bring this. And so they redid some of the language so that the values were still present, but it could be utilized outside of the church. But in addition to the assessment that we've shared with you, they also have a weekly podcast that you can listen to. There is an email, like an encouraging email that you can receive. One of the things that I found to be one of the best resources they do is for both the season of Advent, which are only 3 days in, so it's not too late to start, and the season of Lent. They provide daily devotionals that are centered around living well for those 2 seasons, and they're just wonderful. I know persons that have used that with their entire church for the season and just found it to be so great. So I just want to encourage you to spend a little time, if you'd like, on that website. There are so many wonderful resources that are for free, and we rarely find that these days. And then whether you are a layperson or a clergy, we wanted you to be able to find more information about what we have been calling the Living Well program. Currently, it is designed for clergy. That was clergy health and clergy well living was one of the focuses that we were tasked with 5 years ago. But there is a growing conversation about trying to expand this and build a Living Well program for our laity as well. And we would need some new persons to be involved in some of that work, but you can read about the program. It is a 6-month program that has a retreat at the beginning and the end, and you meet in monthly cohorts. So we just wanted you to have some of these resources as well. And so I think we're going to give ourselves a break from sharing. You might be able to tell, or at least I hope you can tell, that we are incredibly passionate about this work. We all have really personal stories, but I find that has been true of every single person I have engaged in this work with, that every single person has a powerful story of a wellness journey that they are on, and there have been struggles. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to ask questions about the Living Compass, about living well. And so I think we'll open that up for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Twanda and Martha, and of course, Jack. Go ahead, if you would, Amanda, please just stop sharing your screen so we can see all of your lovely faces. I would like to add, I met Jack 33 years ago. My gosh, Jack. When we both entered seminary.
Oh my gosh.
I know. We spent 4 years in a covenant group together. And I don't know about you, Jack, but while we were coming through this whole ministry thing, burnout was like almost the goal.
Yeah, right.
How full can you get? Clergy would go to meetings with, I'll tell you what, a paper calendar and brag about how busy they were.
Yeah.
And they would compare calendars of how busy they were. And it was almost a badge of honor. I even had an SPRC at one of my churches. The SPRC chair during a meeting looked at me and said, "Why do you think you're better than us?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we all take 2 days a week off, and you sometimes only take 1 day a week off. Do you not need to because you're better than us?" And that's when they just started, like, wow, 2 days off. And so I'm just so excited of this whole living well and just this ability that we have to care for our clergy and laity in a holistic way. And yes, Jack, when you and I met, some people, not naming any names, will just use initials. Hillary Ann Golden was 7 years old.
Yes.
But I think it's just so important. And so people know how we get to these topics. I spend all summer researching and asking and praying about what we should be sharing on a Training Tuesday. And I had a layperson reach out to me and say, we need to do something for our clergy and laity to show that there's a different way to live and to interact so that nobody really gets burned out during doing church and life. And so that's when I reached out to Jack, and I'm just so appreciative of all of you being with us tonight. The person who actually asked for this is on the call tonight. And so they know who they are. I want to thank them for bringing this to our attention. We don't have a lot of questions at this point. which I think is really good. So I'm going to give everybody a chance to think for a moment, just giving all of our introverts a chance to get their voice heard. But if there was one thing someone should do with what you shared tonight, what could that one thing be tomorrow morning?
Are you asking us?
I am asking you all. Anyone.
I would
what
say
is the one thing?
The one thing I would say, if I was clergy, that I would go on the website that you provided, the Living Well website, and see how I can sign up and get my church to support me going through the Living Well program if I had not done so.
So could I then add to that, Twanda? If I were a lay person in a church, could I encourage my pastor to go to the website?
If I was a lay person
to support the pastor,
I would absolutely do it. And okay. if I was lay and I was inspired by this, then I would, in order to bring something like this to my congregation, I would go into the Living Compass website. Amanda talked about that they had a resource for Advent, and I think they come out with one during Lent. Right. And maybe your church can do something like that, a Bible study around living well. At least that will be a start, I think.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
I put a link to the Advent study in the chat, although it kind of scrolls up. So I'll do it again. The PDFs are free, so you can get any PDF, download it for free. If you want printed materials, you pay for them, but I think they might be sold out of the printed materials already.
They are.
Yeah. For Advent. Yeah.
We do have a question.
Usually only $1. It's usually only like $1.
We do have a question. If you're somebody who is using some living well practices, what are some ways you can get yourself back on track if you quote unquote fall off the wagon from your practices? How can you reestablish them? How can you get back into that rhythm again? What do you suggest?
So I would like to start with, because it builds on I wanted to add the one thing you might do tomorrow. I love Twanda's answer, but if you are someone like me that struggles with self-judgment, and because it's so detrimental to living well, it often drives a lot of the things you were talking about, Bill, right? Like, why do I work 60 hours a week? Because I need to prove my value, right? So the one thing I would do tomorrow is to say to yourself, I don't have to judge myself today. It's not about what I'm doing wrong or what I'm doing bad. It's about what I would find valuable today. I found myself a lot of times saying to myself, I need to do this today. I need to do this today. And it created a self-imposed sense of pressure, which often led at the end of the day to feeling like a failure. So one of the things I've changed is asking myself, what would you find value in doing today? Whether that is getting laundry done, whether that's paying bills, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's taking a nap, but I would find this valuable. So then at the end of the day, if it didn't happen, I just didn't get to one of the things I would have found valuable today. So I just want to offer that. And then the other thing I would say, when you're trying to get back into something, for myself, if I pick something small that has sort of an immediate feeling of change. So rather than I got to get back into, I fell off my exercise routine over the last several months, and it took me a little while to refine that priority. And so, but I had been going 4 or 5 days a week, and I knew I couldn't go from where I had become back to that. I have to grow back into that. And so I said, all right, if that's where I want to grow to, fine. Let's start with, you're going to go to 1 class a week. And then after some time of that, I've built to, I actually asked a personal trainer to work with me so that I have some accountability, because that's my weakness. I need accountability to it, right? Because it's not my form of play. So, and I think that's the same thing, if you can find one small step, right? So if you're like, gee, I really struggle, my whole house is a mess, right? Well, don't deal with your whole house. Pick one drawer. And sometimes when I'm doing things like that, things particularly that perhaps I don't really want to do, which is one of the reasons I'm not doing them, I will give myself a timer. All right, I'm going to commit to doing this for 10 minutes. And I set that timer and I have full permission. When that timer goes off, I don't have to organize or clean anything else. And sometimes that helps motivate me, and sometimes I just rejoice that I'm done. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, they call those micro habits.
Thank you.
Yeah, you do something so small, it's hard not to do it, and celebrate it. And I think the other thing is to, like you said, have compassion for yourself. Forget about what's already happened. Just because you haven't done that for however long, a week, a month, a year, years, what matters is today. And I love I think it's a Confucian saying, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. Mm-hmm. So don't worry about what's happened in the past. Worry about what you can do today.
And I would also say, if you're into assessments and you want to take that assessment, don't take it with an idea of, oh my gosh, let me see where I'm the weakest. Just take it and look at it with curiosity. Like what am I learning about myself from this? Not how can I beat myself up? Because I think why we like to do that so much, but just be curious about yourself, and then start, as everybody else has said, start small, but no beating up.
As one of my favorite leadership gurus, Ted Lasso, would say, "Be curious, not judgmental."
Right.
Right.
So I actually have started using the Living Compass assessment as a form of journaling, because I'm not drawn to actual writing it down journaling. So I take it on a regular basis, and I sort of have like a binder, and then I can flip through, and I just sort of reflect on, as I see how it moves and how it shapes. Times it's really balanced, times it's really not. And then I think about what was happening that week. And that just helps me understand myself, but it also helps me understand that so much is not in my control. And so sometimes I'm just getting through a week. And that's okay too. Like, I don't have to hit every perfected goal. There are times where we fall away from things because we just have to. And then when the time and the season is right, we can build them again.
Two questions that came in. One question is there any thought of how this can be tailored for youth and young adults?
Oh, yeah. So actually, if you go to the Living Compass website, they actually have a teen. Do the programs and resources drop down, and you can do. They have a teen program. It's a journal-based faith and wellness notebook, and then a leader guide, so that an adult can actually guide them along. There's also a parent workbook with a 6-week session, study session, and there's a faith and wellness workbook with 6 sessions. So I would say that if you really want to lean into this, download those resources. They're free. Take a look at them, and then see if you can find some like-minded people to join you for 6 weeks. Take the assessment, dig into it, and see where it takes you. I can't imagine it's not going to be positive.
Thank you, Jack. Another question that came in.
Oh, can I just offer two, Bill? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Amanda.
We have started to weave the values of living well into our children's sermons. And our children's moments. So particularly around some of the emotional things, talking about things that scare us. Every week when they come up, they're invited to share something that they're excited about or something they're worried about, so that there's just this sense of part of being in faith community is holding one another up. And then I also developed, there's some really amazing children's books and youth books that do a lot of work, not around what you might think of as health, but particularly around, I would say, emotional health and spiritual health. And so I developed like a library of those that are available and we use them in children's moments, and kids can take them and read them whenever they want to.
Thank you. Someone has asked that burnout is a real thing, particularly in smaller congregations. How do you eliminate guilty feelings when you try to get rest or retreat from your regular activities?
Yeah. So, I have served smaller congregations than the one I'm at now, but we usually average on Sunday like 60 to 70 people, just to give a sense, because small is a relative term. So just to give that, we had to change our values, that we valued people more than programs, that we valued relationship more than statistical things that can be measured. And that's hard work to do, because valuing people and relationships feels a little less tangible when you start to do it. And so that we started with some behaviors. So first of all, I will say you have to let go of the self-guilt, right? And that's one of the reasons Living Well comes from this lens of loving the Lord, right? Like, that isn't centered around church. That's centered around God, right? That I'm trying to center my life around church, around God, of which churches and faith communities are a part of. But that's not the center of my life. That faith communities should be a resource that helps us in expressing the fullness of our love for God. And so letting go of some of that self-guilt of really saying, I'm not being lazy. I'm not, it's not that I just don't care. It's that I need to step away. I need to do this. I need a break from this work so that I can bring my full self back to it. But creating an atmosphere where that is received can be challenging. But I would say that it does start with the leadership changing how they respond to things. And sometimes I will say it's had to do with, we had to be intentional around doing the work to grieve things that we simply could not do because we just didn't have the people to do it right now, or we just didn't have it. And it didn't mean that we were bad or that we'd done anything wrong. It just was, that's where we were at. And so sometimes so those are some of the things I've encountered. I don't know about the others.
I appreciate you mentioning that, Amanda, because one of the things I talk about often through my work with the annual conference is more is not better, more is just more. And if your church is feeling burned out, figure out how you can do less well.
Yes. And we have, there have been times where we had gone through so like there was a Lent where we fasted from all administrative responsibilities. There were no meetings. There was nothing. None of any of those things we fasted, because that was the place of burnout for people. And I wanted them to have space to do something else. So that was our form of fasting.
It didn't fall apart?
It did not. How about that? Right? It's amazing. And I will say, for both laity and clergy, we are incredibly valuable individuals, but the church will survive our absence. Maybe we'll be missed. And isn't that wonderful that our gifts are valued in such a way that it's noticed when we're not there. But one of the things I tell my church is, if something happened to me in 2 weeks, you would have a new pastor, and this church would continue, and God would continue to do good work through you, right? And so sometimes seeing ourselves as valuable but not essential can help us find a breath to step away as well.
I wanted to say something about that guilt. I think sometimes looking within yourself to say, why am I feeling guilty when I need to rest and retreat? I think processing that for yourself, why do I feel guilty? Because sometimes the guilt has nothing to do with the community or the people. It has to do with myself, right? And that's the reason why, like, as I was going through the quadrant, I talked about what was important is in each quadrant, look at family of origin. Because guilt comes from something else. It comes from something within myself. Amanda was talking about one of the things that they do in their congregation. One thing we do is every August, we have a month of rest. So our congregation do nothing but except Sunday morning, no meetings, no nothing in the month of August. And the church love it. Like when I introduced it, like, when we do the church calendar, they go, oh, that's right. Nothing is in August. So it kind of almost give people permission. Sometimes you got to give people permission to do something. So it almost gives them permission to take vacation in August. It gives them permission to stop in August. It gives them permission to pause in August. And sometimes you got to give people an out. Sometimes we as clergy, but I just was thinking about that guilt. That guilt comes from within, right? If you're guilty about resting, if you're guilty about taking a retreat, that's self-reflection.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you for not just the information. I mean, we could read all of this, I'm sure, on a wonderful website, Google it someplace. Thank you for your vulnerability. and for your authenticity and just bringing your whole and real selves to us this evening. I truly appreciate everybody for taking the time to be with us. If you could drop a word of encouragement and thanks to our presenters in the chat, give them an opportunity to see your appreciation as I give some shameless plugs for the rest of our training Tuesdays for 2024. We have 2 training Tuesdays left in 2024. Next Tuesday, December 10th, we have a special presenter, Dr. Teresa Holder. She is the professor of communication and the head of the Department of Communications at Meredith College. She is going to teach us about leadership and church administration, about mastering meeting dynamics. So you can learn all about how to master a meeting and then cancel them all. So I think that would be a wonderful way to implement both. We want to learn, but she's going to be doing about dynamics, about facilitating, structuring meetings, how to respect and honor cultural differences, how to work through conflict, how to work with introverts and extroverts. It's a wonderful presentation. I'll give a plug for Jack. He introduced me to Dr. Holder, and we're excited that she's coming. And then probably the most exciting training Tuesday you will ever experience, and the one that will probably be some of our largest attendance on December 17th, statistical reports training. I know that excites everybody, but we are going to be led by Dave Scholler and John Goutier about how to productively and correctly fill out the wonderful statistical reports that I know everybody looks forward to. Those registrations are available on all of the websites that you could think of: the Baltimore-Washington Conference website, the Peninsula Delaware Conference website, and the Episcopal Area website. All has information about our upcoming Training Tuesdays. And as we have said, this has been recorded tonight, and the recording and a PDF of the slides will be available. We do try to get those on the various websites by Friday, if all works out well. So by the end of this week, you should be able to access that. And this would be a wonderful video to share with a staff parish relations committee or a church council to encourage that everyone in the church learns how to live well. So again, thank you to the 4 of you for joining and leading us through this. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And I will see, hopefully, all of you next week. And for those who have the joy of being retired, Martha, if you'd like to come to the statistical report training, I will save you a seat. It'll be wonderful. So, have a great night, everyone. Thanks for coming, and have a wonderful Advent.